The words, spoken in a low, conspiratorial hiss of expensive perfume and entitlement, cut through the quiet hum of the first-class lounge. Absolutely not. I will not be seated there. Amara Jones kept her eyes fixed on the spine of her book, but the pages had blurred into an incomprehensible mess of ink. She felt the woman's gaze on her, a physical weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She didn't need to look up to know. She had felt that specific dismissive stare her entire life. It was a look that measured her skin color, her simple but neat travel clothes, her braided hair, and found them all wanting. "Ma'am, it is your assigned seat," the gate agent said, her voice strained with practiced patience. "The flight is completely full." "Then you can unfull it," a man's voice boomed, dripping with the kind of casual arrogance that only came from a lifetime of never being told no. "My wife is uncomfortable. We paid for a premium experience, not this." This. The word hung in the air, a small, sharp dart aimed directly at Amara. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the air tasting like ash in her mouth. She had won a contest, a stupid, one-in-a-million contest from a travel blog she followed, upgrading her economy ticket to Seoul into the rarefied air of first class. For 24 hours, she had been ecstatic, dreaming of champagne and lay-flat seats. Now she just wished she were crammed in the back with everyone else, where her presence was at least anonymously tolerated. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her now, some with pity, some with irritation at the delay, and some, she knew, with silent agreement. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own quiet dignity. She would not look up. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. She would simply sit here, read her book, and pretend she was deaf, blind, and impervious. "There is nothing I can do," the agent insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sure a manager could do something," the man retorted. A silence fell, thick and suffocating. Amara braced herself for the inevitable escalation, the arrival of a supervisor, the quiet offer of a voucher, the humiliating public negotiation of her humanity. But the voice that broke the silence was not one she expected. It was low and smooth, like single malt whiskey poured over a shard of ice. It carried an authority that was neither loud nor demanding, but absolute. "There is a problem?" Amara's head finally lifted. He stood a few feet away, a specter of impossible elegance in the sterile airport lounge. He was tall, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent for a year. His face was a masterpiece of sharp angles and stark beauty, with intelligent eyes the color of dark, wet earth. A single faint scar, pale against his temple, only served to make him more striking. He wasn't looking at the irate couple. He was looking at her. It was not a look of pity. It was not a look of curiosity. It was a look of recognition, as if he had been searching for a face in a crowd his entire life and had just, in this tawdry, humiliating moment, found it. The world seemed to slow, the ambient noise of the airport fading into a distant hum. For a single, breathless second, there was only the man in the suit and the unnerving intensity of his gaze. It felt like a brand, searing and immediate. He was Jin Hwan Kwan, and in that moment, the carefully constructed fortress around his heart, built over a lifetime of duty and darkness, developed its first critical crack. He saw the proud set of her shoulders, the tremor in the hand holding her book, the sheer force of will it took for her not to crumble. He saw strength, he saw fire, and something inside him, a dormant, sleeping thing, woke up and staked a claim. The spell was broken when the entitled man puffed out his chest. "Yes, there's a problem. This is a private matter." Jin Hwan's eyes finally slid from Amara to the couple. The shift was glacial, and the warmth, if it could even be called that, in his gaze vanished, replaced by a polar frost. "All problems on this aircraft are my problems," Jin Hwan stated simply. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The air grew 10 degrees colder. You are uncomfortable with your seating assignment. Yes, the woman snipped, emboldened by a new ally, misreading the situation entirely. Next to her? Jin Huan gave a slow, deliberate nod. He turned to the gate agent, who looked terrified. He spoke in Korean, his tone still quiet, but now laced with a command that was as sharp as a razor's edge. The agent's eyes widened. She typed frantically into her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She nodded, pale and shaken. Then he turned back to the couple and switched to flawless, unaccented English. You are right. A premium experience should be free of discomfort. Your tickets have been canceled. The man's jaw dropped. What? You can't do that. I can, Jin Huan said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming something dangerous. And I have. Your luggage will be removed from the aircraft. The airline will graciously refund your purchase. You will not be flying to Seoul today, or on any flight on this airline, ever again. Who the hell do you think you are? The man blustered, his face turning a blotchy red. Jin Huan took a single step closer. He didn't loom. He didn't threaten. He simply existed in their space, and his existence was a threat in itself. I am the man who owns the airline. It was a lie. A beautiful, breathtaking, brutally effective lie. He didn't own the airline, but he owned the company that owned the holding firm that was the airline's largest private creditor. The distinction was irrelevant. The effect was absolute. Two large men in dark suits who had been standing like statues by the entrance suddenly moved with fluid grace. They flanked the couple, their presence non-negotiable. The husband sputtered, the wife paled, and without another word they were escorted away, their indignant protests swallowed by the long corridor. The lounge was silent. The other passengers stared, a mixture of awe and fear on their faces. The gate agent looked like she wanted to both thank him and run from him. Jin Huan ignored them all. He walked the few remaining steps and stopped in front of Amara's seat. He gestured to the empty seat beside her, the one the woman had so vocally objected to. Is this seat taken? He asked. His voice once again that low, smooth rumble. Amara stared up at him, her heart still doing a frantic tap dance against her ribs. She finally found her voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. No, it's not. Good, he said. And Jin Huan Quan, the reluctant king of Seoul's glittering, violent underworld, sat down beside the woman who had, in the space of 5 minutes, become the most important person in his world. The flight was a 9-hour exercise in excruciating awareness. From her side, Amara felt the heat of him, the sheer, solid presence of the man beside her. He didn't speak. After the gate agent scanned his boarding pass and they were settled, a cone of silence descended. He opened a sleek, impossibly thin laptop and began to work, his fingers moving over the keys with silent efficiency. Numbers and charts in Korean filled the screen. Amara tried to return to her book, but the words still swam. Her mind was a whirlwind. Who was he? The lie about owning the airline had been delivered with such chilling conviction that she had almost believed it. The power he wielded was not the blustering entitlement of the couple he'd dispatched. It was something older, colder, and far more terrifying. It was the power of consequence. She risked a glance at him. His focus on his work was absolute. The harsh cabin light carved his profile into a study of angles and shadows. The faint scar near his hairline seemed to pulse with a story she couldn't read. He was, she admitted to the most private part of her mind, devastatingly handsome. But it was a beauty that felt dangerous, like a perfectly forged blade. I should thank him, she thought. It was the polite thing to do. He had defended her in his own terrifying way, but the words lodged in her throat. Thanking him felt like acknowledging a debt, and she had a feeling that debts to a man like him were not easily repaid. She was a freelance translator living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny Seoul apartment, saving every spare one to one day open a small language school for underprivileged kids. Her life was a careful construction of independence. Men like him, with their casual power and bespoke suits, were the wrecking balls that demolished lives like hers for sport. He must have felt her gaze. Without looking up from his screen, he said, "They were wrong." His voice, so close and unexpected, made her jump. I'm sorry." He finally turned his head, and those dark, intense eyes pinned her in place. What they said, the way they looked at you, it was wrong. There was no judgment, no pity. It was a simple statement of fact, as clear and hard as a diamond. "It happens," she said, the automatic self-preservationist response she'd used 1,000 times. She hated how weak it sounded. "It shouldn't," he countered. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he returned to his screen. And that was that. For the rest of the flight, they sat in a silence that was more charged than any conversation. When the meal service came, he ordered for them both in fluent Korean, choosing the bibimbap without even asking her, as if he already knew she'd prefer it to the Western option. Annoyingly, he was right. As the plane began its descent into Incheon, a knot of anxiety tightened in Amara's stomach. This strange, surreal interlude was ending. Soon, she would be back in her real life, and he would disappear into whatever world produced men who could cancel international flights on a whim. There was a part of her, a foolish, reckless part, that was disappointed. When the seatbelt sign switched off, he closed his laptop and stood. He was even taller than she'd thought, his frame filling the space. He retrieved his single, elegant leather carry-on from the overhead bin, then reached for her worn, slightly battered backpack. "I can get it," she said quickly, a reflexive defense of her own capability. He ignored her, pulling it down with ease and holding it out. His fingers brushed hers as she took it, a spark of static electricity that felt more like a jolt from a live wire. "Amara," he said. It wasn't a question. Her name was on her boarding pass, which he must have glimpsed. But the way he said it, the low timbre of his voice wrapping around the syllables, made it sound like an intimate secret. "How did you—" "My name is Jinhwan Kwan," he said, cutting her off. He didn't offer a handshake. He just stated his name as he had stated everything else, as an undeniable fact. They deplaned in silence, his two suited sentinels appearing as if from thin air to flank him at a respectful distance. Amara's plan was to thank him quickly and then melt into the anonymity of the arrivals hall. "Thank you for what you did," she said, forcing the words out as they walked. "It was unnecessary, but thank you." It was necessary. He corrected her again. They reached the customs hall. He was ushered toward a diplomatic channel she didn't even know existed, bypassing the long, snaking lines. He paused, turning to her. "A car is waiting for you," he said. Amara blinked. "I'm sorry?" "A car. To take you home." The bubble of her brief fantasy popped. Of course. The rich, powerful man, assuming he could manage her life. Her spine stiffened. "No, thank you. I can take the bus." A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed his face. It was the first time she'd seen him look anything less than perfectly controlled. He was clearly not a man accustomed to being refused. "The bus is inefficient," he stated. "The bus is my business," she retorted, a bit more sharply than she'd intended. "But thank you for the offer." She gave him a curt nod, turned on her heel, and walked toward the regular immigration line, her back ramrod straight. She could feel his eyes on her the entire way. It took every ounce of her willpower not to look back. Jinhwan watched her go, a small, unfamiliar smile touching his lips. In his world, people vied for his attention, for his favor, for the scraps of power he could bestow. They were sycophants, enemies, or pawns. No one had ever dismissed him so cleanly. No one had ever chosen a bus over him. His lieutenant, Min Jun, appeared at his elbow. Min Jun was the only person in the world Jin Hwan considered a friend, a man whose loyalty had been forged in the violent crucible of their shared youth. "Chairman Kwan is expecting you at the headquarters, Hyung," Min Jun said quietly. Hyung, the respectful term for an older brother, was a relic of their childhood that he only used when they were alone. "Change of plans?" Jin Huan said, his eyes still on the spot where Amara had disappeared into the crowd. Hyung, find out everything about her. Amara Jones, where she lives, where she works, what she eats for breakfast, he commanded, his voice soft but absolute. And have a car follow her bus. Discreetly? Minjun's professional mask didn't slip, but Jin Huan could see the question in his eyes. Sir, your father. My father can wait, Jin Huan said, a cold edge entering his tone. He finally turned away from the crowd, his mind already spinning. He had a new priority. Her name was Amara Jones, and she preferred the bus. He found that fact utterly, hopelessly captivating. Life and soul snapped back to its normal, grinding rhythm for Amara. Her tiny two-bedroom apartment, which she shared with her best friend Chloe, an English teacher from Chicago, felt both comfortingly familiar and disappointingly small after the luxury of the flight. Chloe listened to the story of the airport incident with wide-eyed fascination. Oh, so a real-life Korean drama hero rescued you? Chloe asked, perched on the edge of Amara's bed. Tall, dark, handsome, and mysteriously powerful? He was terrifying, Chloe, Amara corrected, unpacking her backpack. The way he looked at that couple, it wasn't heroic. It was predatory. Predator, hero, whatever. He was on your side, Chloe mused. And his name is Jin Huan Quan? That sounds, important. It sounds like trouble, Amara muttered. She tried to put him out of her mind, focusing on the stack of freelance translation work that had piled up. She worked from home, from cafes, from anywhere with a Wi-Fi signal, translating dry business documents and technical manuals. It was soul-crushing work, but it paid the bills and edged her closer to her dream. 3 days later, the first anomaly occurred. A delivery arrived at her apartment. It wasn't a lavish bouquet of roses or a box of expensive chocolates. It was a single perfect orchid in a simple ceramic pot, its petals a deep, velvety purple. The card contained only 3 words, printed in elegant script. It shouldn't happen. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Okay, this is moving from Korean drama hero to high-end stalker, Chloe said, peering at the flower. It's beautiful, though. It's creepy, Amara said, her heart doing a nervous flutter. How did he know her address? The question was a cold stone in the pit of her stomach. She put the orchid on her windowsill, telling herself it was just a flower, but it felt like an emissary from another world, a quiet, watching presence in her small room. From his penthouse apartment overlooking the Han River, Jin Huan reviewed the file Min Jun had prepared. Amara Jones, 28 years old, graduated from Howard University with a degree in East Asian Studies, in Seoul for 3 years. No family in Korea. One friend, Chloe Benson, financial status, precarious. Dream. A language school for multicultural children. The file was thorough, clinical. It detailed her favorite coffee shop, the brand of tea she bought, the route she took on her morning runs. It was a complete invasion of her privacy, a standard operating procedure for him when assessing a new person of interest. But reading it felt different. It felt profane. He was cataloging the details of a life so vibrant and principled it made his own feel like a monochrome wasteland of obligations. He had sent the orchid. It was a risk. Too much, and he would scare her. Too little, and he would fade from her memory. He chose the orchid because the file said she'd once spent 10 minutes admiring one in a flower shop window before walking away. He wanted to give her something she wanted but wouldn't get for herself. Your father called again, Min Jun reported, entering the vast, minimalist living room. He is displeased you missed the meeting. My father is perpetually displeased, Jin Huan said, not looking up from the file. His father, Chairman Kwan, ruled their organization, the Golden Dragon Syndicate, with an iron fist, even in his semi-retirement. He saw Jin Huan not as a son, but as a successor, a tool to perpetuate his legacy, a legacy of racketeering, illicit finance, and violence that masqueraded as a legitimate logistics and construction empire. He knows you confronted the Americans at the airport. He said it was reckless. It drew attention. Good, Jin Huan said. He closed the file. I'm going out. Sir? You don't need to follow. Minjun's face remained impassive, but his concern was a tangible thing. Is that wise? Probably not, Jinhuan admitted, a rare, dry flicker of self-deprecation in his tone. For the first time in a decade, he was about to do something that wasn't calculated, something that wasn't for the family or the business. It was just for him. Amara was at her favorite cafe, a small, cozy place in Hongdae, trying to decipher a poorly written contract for a plastics manufacturer. The work was numbing. She was nursing a lukewarm Americano, the caffeine doing little to sharpen her focus. The bell over the door chimed. She didn't look up until a shadow fell over her table. It was him. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in dark jeans, a simple black cashmere sweater, and a leather jacket. The casual clothes somehow made him look even more intimidating, like a panther trying to disguise itself as a house cat. He held a coffee in his hand. "This is my favorite cafe," she said, her voice tight. It was a lie. She had 3 favorite cafes she rotated between. The fact that he was here was not a coincidence. "The coffee is good," he replied smoothly, gesturing to the empty chair opposite her. "May I?" "It's a free country," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Mostly." He sat, placing his cup on the table. He didn't crowd her, but his presence seemed to shrink the room, drawing all the air toward him. "How did you find me?" she asked, getting straight to the point. "I have my methods," he said, his expression unreadable. "Is that supposed to sound mysterious or just creepy?" she shot back. "Because it's landing squarely in the creepy zone." A corner of his mouth twitched. It was the closest she'd seen him come to a genuine smile. "My apologies, I was in the neighborhood." "My neighborhood. Uninvited." "I am inviting myself to have coffee with you," he said. "Will you accept?" Her mind screamed no. This man was a walking red flag, a whole parade of them. But her heart, the traitorous organ, was pounding a frantic, excited rhythm. She was scared of him, and she was, to her absolute horror, intrigued by him. "One coffee," she said, her voice betraying none of her internal turmoil. "Then you leave my neighborhood." "Fair enough," he agreed. For the next hour, they talked. Or rather, she talked, and he listened. Prodded by his quiet, intelligent questions, she found herself telling him about her dream for the school, her frustration with her work, her love for the chaotic energy of Seoul. She didn't mean to reveal so much. It just came out. He listened with an unnerving stillness, his dark eyes never leaving her face. It felt like being seen in a way she never had before. He told her almost nothing about himself. His work was family business. His life was complicated. The vagueness was a wall, but for the first time, she sensed it wasn't a wall meant to intimidate her, but one built to protect something inside. When her cup was empty, he stood as promised. "Thank you for the coffee, Amara." "I didn't buy you coffee." "You shared your time. It's more valuable," he said. He paused, his gaze intense. "Have dinner with me tomorrow." It wasn't a question. "I'm busy," she lied automatically. "The day after tomorrow, then." "This is not going to happen," she said, crossing her arms. "I don't know you." "You are beginning to," he said. "And I am beginning to know you. You are principled, you are kind, and you are wary of men who send you orchids. All excellent qualities. Dinner. The day after tomorrow. I will have a car pick you up at 7. And then he was gone, leaving her sitting in the cafe with her heart racing and the scent of expensive leather and cold night air lingering in his place. She should have been angry at his presumption. She should have been terrified by his persistence. Instead, she was thinking about what she would wear. The car that arrived was a sleek black sedan with windows so tinted they were like polished obsidian. Amara, wearing her one good black dress, felt a fresh wave of apprehension. Chloe gave her a thumbs up from the doorway. "Have fun! Don't let him sell you into indentured servitude." "Hilarious," Amara muttered, sliding into the plush leather interior. The restaurant was not a flashy, Michelin-starred establishment. It was a small traditional house tucked away in a quiet, historic neighborhood. Inside, it was just one room with one table, set for two. Jin Huan was already there, waiting. He stood when she entered. He had a gift. Not flowers this time, but a beautifully bound first edition of a book by her favorite author, a long out-of-print collection of essays she'd mentioned in the cafe. "How?" she whispered, her fingers tracing the embossed title. "This wasn't something you could just buy." "I have people who are very good at finding things," he said simply. The confession was chilling, but the gesture was so specific, so thoughtful, it disarmed her. The entire evening was like that, a dance between the unnerving and the enchanting. He was a perfect gentleman, attentive and surprisingly funny, with a dry, self-deprecating humor that surfaced in brief, unexpected flashes. He told her a story about trying to learn to cook as a teenager and nearly burning down his family's kitchen, and for a moment, she saw not the terrifying kingpin, but a lonely boy. She found herself relaxing, laughing. She saw the man behind the armor, and she was starting to like him, dangerously so. As they ate, her curiosity finally overwhelmed her caution. "Your family business," she began, choosing her words carefully. "You're very vague about it." The warmth in his eyes cooled slightly. "It is extensive. Logistics, construction, private investment." The words were generic, corporate, but she heard the unspoken words hanging in the air between them. She knew there was more. A lot more. The way people deferred to him, the ever-present but unseen security, the sheer aura of power he radiated, it didn't come from a simple construction business. "Is it legal?" she asked bluntly. The question hung between them. He didn't flinch. He just held her gaze, his expression becoming serious. "Some parts are more legal than others. It is a legacy I inherited, not one I chose." It was a half-confession, an admission of darkness that should have sent her running. It was the biggest red flag yet, but his honesty, however partial, drew her in further. He wasn't hiding that there was a darkness. He was just unwilling to show her its depths. Not yet. "That sounds difficult," she said softly. "It is," he said, and the simple admission held a world of weariness. In that moment, she saw the weight he carried, the gilded cage he lived in. Her heart ached for him, an impulse that defied all logic and reason. The drive home was quiet. When the car pulled up to her apartment building, he didn't get out. He just turned to her in the shadowed interior of the car. "I enjoyed this evening, Amara," he said, his voice low. "So did I," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Despite my better judgment." Sometimes our better judgment is wrong. He leaned closer, and her breath caught in her throat. He didn't try to kiss her. He just gently brushed a stray braid back from her face, his fingers cool against her skin. The touch was feather light, but it sent a shock wave through her entire body. "Good night, Jin Huan," she said, her voice unsteady. She practically fled from the car, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't look back, but she knew he was watching until she was safely inside. Upstairs, Chloe was waiting with a carton of ice cream. "So, do you have a soul left?" Amara sank onto the sofa, her legs feeling like jelly. "I think I might be in serious trouble, Chloe." "Good trouble or bad trouble?" Amara buried her face in her hands. "I honestly have no idea." Their courtship, if it could be called that, unfolded in a strange duality. In her world, he was Jin Huan, the quiet, intense man who would show up at her apartment with her favorite street food, who would walk with her for hours by the Cheongyecheon stream, listening to her talk about her day. He remembered every little detail, every casual mention. He learned her, but there was always his world lurking at the edges. Sometimes their dates would be cut short by a cryptic phone call, his face hardening as he spoke in low, rapid Korean. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of a black sedan parked down the street from her apartment, a silent, watchful guardian. She learned not to ask questions. She told herself it was none of her business. She told herself she was only falling for the man, not his world. It was a lie she was becoming increasingly desperate to believe. From Jin Huan's perspective, his life had been split in two. There was the darkness, the business, the endless meetings with his father. And then there was Amara. She was the light. She was the only real thing in his life. The hours he spent with her were the only ones where he felt like he could breathe. She knew nothing of the violence that underpinned his wealth, the compromises he made every day. He kept that part of his life hermetically sealed from her, a toxic secret he guarded with everything he had. He was falling in love. The realization didn't come to him in a rush, but as a slow, dawning certainty. It was terrifying. Love was a vulnerability he couldn't afford. It was a weakness his enemies and even his own father would exploit. Chairman Kwan was not a fool. He saw the change in his son. He saw the divided attention, the new softness in his eyes that vanished the moment he entered the corporate headquarters. "This woman," his father said one evening, seated behind his massive mahogany desk. He didn't need to say her name. "She is a foreigner, an outsider. She is a distraction." "She is not your concern," Jin Huan replied, his voice cold. "Everything you do is my concern." The chairman snapped, his voice like grinding stones. "Our world has no place for this kind of sentimentality. She will make you weak. Our rivals will see it. They will use her to get to you, to get to us. End it." "No," Jin Huan said. The word was quiet, but it was absolute. It was the first time he had ever directly defied a command from his father regarding his personal life. The chairman's eyes narrowed into slits. "Do not forget who you are, Jin Huan. Do not forget your duty. This family, this organization, comes before everything. Before her." The threat was unspoken but clear. Jin Huan left his father's office with a cold dread coiling in his gut. He had naively thought he could keep his two worlds separate. He was wrong. They were on a collision course. The collision came sooner than he expected. It was a Tuesday night. He was with Amara in her apartment, helping her cook. It was a scene of such simple domestic peace it almost made his heart ache. She was laughing, her face dusted with flour, as she tried to teach him how to fold mandu. He was clumsy, his large hands unused to such delicate work. He was happy. Then his phone buzzed. It was a text from Min Jun. One word, trouble. A second text followed. A location. A rival faction, the Vipers, had grown bold. They had ambushed one of his shipments, a direct challenge to his authority. It required an immediate, decisive response, the kind of response that involved men and violence, not words. "I have to go," he said, his voice suddenly tight. The warmth of the evening evaporated. Amara's smile faded. She saw the change in him, the sudden shift from the gentleman folding dumplings to the cold, distant stranger. "Is everything okay?" "It's work," he lied, wiping his hands. "I'm sorry." He leaned in to kiss her goodbye, but his movements were stiff, distracted. She could feel the tension humming off him. As he pulled away, her eyes fell to his waist, where his jacket had ridden up slightly. Tucked into the back of his jeans, almost completely concealed, was the black handle of a gun. She froze. The sight was so incongruous, so alien in her tiny, flour-dusted kitchen. A gun. Not a theoretical concept from a movie, but a real, solid piece of metal and death. All the little red flags she had so willfully ignored suddenly converged into a giant, screaming siren. Her blood ran cold. She said nothing as he left. She just stared at the door he had closed behind him, the half-made dumplings forgotten on the counter. The two worlds had not just collided. His had just invaded hers, leaving behind the cold, hard proof of its existence. He came back 3 hours later. There were no visible signs of what had transpired, but she could see it in his eyes. A haunted, weary darkness that he couldn't quite conceal. There was a new tension in his shoulders, and a faint metallic smell clung to him, the smell of blood and cordite. She was sitting on the sofa in the dark, waiting. "Amara," he said, his voice cautious as he entered. "I saw it," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The gun." He didn't deny it. He just stood there, silhouetted in the doorway, the shadows of his two lives finally merging. "Sit down, Jinhwan," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it held a new, fragile authority. "And you're going to tell me everything. No more lies, no more vague half-truths. Everything." He looked at her, at the woman he loved, her face pale in the dim light, and he knew this was it, the moment he had been dreading. He could lie, try to deflect, try to protect her from the ugliness of his truth, but he looked into her clear, unflinching eyes and knew she deserved more than that. She deserved the truth, no matter how monstrous. So he sat, and in the quiet of her small apartment, surrounded by the scent of flower and her perfume, Jin Huan Quan confessed. He told her everything. He started with his grandfather, a refugee who clawed his way to power in the rubble of post-war Seoul, building an empire on grit, cunning, and brutality. He spoke of his father, who expanded that empire, cloaking its criminal heart in a veneer of corporate legitimacy. And he spoke of himself, the heir apparent, groomed from birth to take the throne. He didn't spare her the details. He told her about the loan sharking, the racketeering, the way they used extortion and violence to muscle out competitors. He told her his title wasn't CEO, not really. In the underworld, they called him the Dragon's Head. He told her where he had just been, what he had just done, not in gory detail, but he made it clear that his authority was maintained through fear and force. "The men who work for me, they get hurt. Sometimes they hurt other people," he said, his voice a low, rough monotone. "It is a world of violence, Amara. I have tried to keep you from it, but I cannot change what it is. I cannot change what I am." Amara listened in silence, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. Each word was a physical blow, dismantling the image she had so carefully constructed of him. The gentle man who brought her street food, the lonely boy who burned his kitchen, the powerful protector on the airplane. He was all of those things, but he was also this, a kingpin, a gangster. Her heart was breaking. It was shattering into a million tiny pieces. She felt sick, betrayed, not by his lies, but by her own willful blindness. She had known. Deep down, she had known something was wrong, and she had ignored it because she wanted to believe in the fairy tale. When he finally finished, the silence in the room was a heavy, suffocating blanket. He watched her, his face a mask of anguish, waiting for her verdict. "Why?" she finally whispered, her voice raw. "Why tell me? Why not just lie?" "Because I love you," he said. The words were not a romantic declaration. They were a raw, painful confession, torn from the deepest part of him. "And I cannot love you with a lie between us." The words should have been a comfort. Instead, they were the final killing stroke. "I love you." He loved her enough to tell her the truth. And the truth was that his world would poison hers. It already had. The gun in her kitchen. The fear coiling in her stomach. This was her life now, if she stayed. Looking over her shoulder, wondering if the man she loved was coming home from a business meeting or an act of violence. Wondering if the next rival faction would target him, or worse, target her. Her principles, the very core of who she was, screamed in protest. She had built her life on honesty, on hard work, on a dream of helping others. His world was the antithesis of everything she believed in. Tears finally welled in her eyes, hot and bitter. "I can't," she choked out, the words ripping her throat. "Jin Huan, I can't do this." She saw the hope die in his eyes. It was like watching a light being extinguished, leaving only darkness behind. He had known this was a possibility, but the reality of it still buckled him. "I can't be that person," she continued, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "I can't live in that world. I can't love a man who does those things. It will destroy me. It will destroy everything I am." She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself as if to hold her splintering self together. I have to go. Go where? He asked, his voice hollow. Away, from you, from this. She looked around her small apartment, which now felt tainted, unsafe. I think I need to go home, back to the States. The finality in her voice was like a physical blow. He didn't try to argue. He didn't try to make promises he couldn't keep. He knew she was right. To ask her to stay was to ask her to sacrifice her soul. And he loved her too much to do that. He stood, and for a moment, she thought he would reach for her. But he just stood there, a chasm of his own making between them. I understand, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of the kingpin, the dragon's head, locking his heart away in a vault of ice. No, you don't, she sobbed. You don't understand what you're asking me to give up. I am not asking you to give up anything, he said quietly. I am letting you go. It was the most painful, selfless thing he had ever done. She left 2 days later. She sold what little furniture she had, packed 2 suitcases, and said a tearful goodbye to Chloe. She didn't see Jin Huan again. There were no last-minute airport dashes, no dramatic pleas. There was only a vast, aching silence. As her plane took off from Incheon, the same airport where they had met, she looked out the window at the sprawling lights of Seoul and wept. She was flying toward safety, toward sanity, and it felt like she was leaving her heart behind at 30,000 feet. The misery of separation was a physical thing, a constant, dull ache in Amara's chest. She moved back into her childhood bedroom in her mother's house in Maryland. The room was a time capsule of a person she no longer was, filled with high school trophies and faded posters. Her mother, a practical woman who had always been wary of Amara's move to Korea, was kind but uncomprehending. You did the right thing, baby, her mother said, patting her hand. You don't get involved with men like that. No good can come of it. Amara knew her mother was right. Intellectually, she knew it. But her heart refused to listen. The world, which had seemed so vibrant and full of possibility and soul, now felt muted and gray. She tried to find translation work, but her motivation was gone. Her dream of a language school felt impossibly distant, a relic of a life that no longer belonged to her. She would wake up in the middle of the night, her hand reaching for the other side of the bed, expecting to find him there. The phantom sensation of his fingers brushing her cheek would bring fresh tears. She missed his quiet presence, his intense gaze, the way he listened as if she were the only person in the world. She missed the man, not the monster. But the two were inextricably linked, and the agony was in knowing she could not have one without the other. She was safe, and she had never been more unhappy. For Jin Huan, Amara's absence was not an ache. It was an amputation. He had cut off the best part of himself and sent it away. His penthouse felt cavernous and empty. The city lights outside his window, once a symbol of his power, now seemed to mock his loneliness. He threw himself back into his work, but the purpose was gone. He was more ruthless, more efficient than ever. He consolidated his power, crushing the vipers with a brutal finality that sent shockwaves through the underworld. His men looked at him with a new level of fear. The softness Amara had brought out in him was gone, replaced by a frightening glacial cold. His father was pleased. Good, the chairman said after the viper situation was resolved. You see now, sentiment is a disease. You have cured yourself. Jin Huan looked at his father, at the old man whose ambition had built this prison of power and violence, and he felt nothing but a cold, empty hatred. He had not cured himself. He had merely succumbed to the disease he was born with. Min Jun watched his friend with growing alarm. Jin Huan was functioning, leading, commanding, but he was a ghost. The light in his eyes was gone. One night, Min Jun found him standing on the balcony of his penthouse, staring out at the city, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Hyung, Min Jun said softly, this is not living. This is what is required. Jin Huan said, his voice flat. Is it? Minjun pressed, bolder than he had ever been. She is gone. You are miserable. The chairman is happy. Does that seem like a victory to you? Jin Huan was silent for a long time, the wind whipping at his hair. He thought of Amara's laugh, the flower on her face, the fierce, principled fire in her eyes when she told him she couldn't be a part of his world. She hadn't asked him to change. She had simply stated that she could not accept him as he was. The choice had always been his. He could remain a king in his dark, lonely kingdom, or he could try to become a man who was worthy of her. A decision began to form in his mind. Not a whim, but a tectonic shift in the foundation of his soul. It was a terrifying, audacious, and possibly suicidal idea. It was a declaration of war against his own life, his own legacy. He turned to Minjun, and for the first time in months, a flicker of the old fire returned to his eyes. It was not the cold fire of the kingpin, but the determined fire of a man with a purpose. No, Jin Huan said, his voice resonating with a new, dangerous conviction. It is not a victory. He looked at his loyal friend, his brother in all but blood. I'm going to burn it all down. The war began the next day. Jin Huan called a meeting, not with his capos and enforcers, but with a team of the most ruthless forensic accountants and corporate lawyers in Seoul. He didn't summon them to his headquarters. He met them in a neutral office, a sterile space that signaled a new beginning. The Golden Dragon Syndicate is going legitimate, he announced, his voice calm and steady. Completely. I want every illicit asset identified, liquidated, and reinvested into clean enterprise. I want every tie to the underworld severed. I want a full, top-to-bottom restructuring. We will keep the construction and logistics arms, but they will be scrubbed until they are pristine. Everything else goes. The lawyers and accountants stared at him as if he had grown a second head. What he was proposing wasn't just difficult, it was seismic. It would mean dismantling a criminal empire that had been built over 70 years. It would make him enemies of every dark power in the city. It would mean confronting his own father. This will be bloody, one of the lawyers finally said, his voice trembling. Metaphorically and, perhaps, literally. I am aware, Jin Huan said. Your job is the paperwork. I will handle the rest. The first move was to cut off the loan sharking operations. He called in all the debts, but with a shocking offer: repay the principal, and the exorbitant interest was forgiven. For those who couldn't pay, the debt was wiped clean. He was effectively setting fire to millions of dollars in black money, the lifeblood of the syndicate. His underbosses were furious. They saw it as weakness. The confrontation with his father was brutal. Jin Huan went to the family estate, the traditional house where he had grown up, and laid out his plan. Chairman Quan listened, his face growing darker with every word. You are a fool, the chairman hissed when Jin Huan was finished. You are spitting on your grandfather's grave. You are destroying our family for a woman, a worthless outsider. I am saving it, Jin Huan countered, his voice like steel. This path, our path, ends in a prison cell or a grave. There is no future in it. I am building a future. There is no future for you if you do this, his father roared, slamming his fist on the table. I will not allow it. The family will not allow it. I will have you removed. The family is with me, Jin Huan said coldly. He had spent weeks securing the loyalties of the younger generation, the ones who were tired of living in the shadows. He had offered them a different path, a chance at a real life. Min Jun is with me. You are the one who is alone, father. You can either step aside and accept a peaceful retirement, or you can be swept aside. The choice is yours. It was the ultimate betrayal in his father's eyes. The son deposing the father. Chairman Quan looked at him with pure, undiluted hatred. You are no longer my son, he spat. I know, Jin Huan said, the words costing him more than he let on. He walked out of his childhood home for the last time, the bridge to his past burned to ashes behind him. The process was a nightmare. Rival gangs, smelling blood in the water, tested his new boundaries. There were attempts on his life, on Min Jun's. But Jin Huan met them not with the old gangland brutality, but with a new kind of warfare. He used his immense resources, his legal team, and his connections within the legitimate police force he was now courting. He fed anonymous tips, exposed their operations, and watched as the official justice system did the dirty work for him. He was dismantling the underworld from within. It took 6 months. 6 months of barely sleeping, of living with constant threats, of systematically tearing down the house he was born to rule. In Maryland, Amara was unaware of the war being waged in Seoul. She had finally started to piece her life back together. She had a steady, boring job translating for a government contractor. She was saving money again. The ache for Jin Huan had subsided into a dull, permanent scar tissue around her heart. Then a package arrived. A simple manila envelope with a Korean postmark. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, there was no letter, no romantic plea, just a collection of documents. There were press clippings from major Korean financial newspapers with headlines about the shocking restructuring of the Golden Dragon conglomerate. There were copies of legal filings, stamped and verified, showing the dissolution of shell corporations she recognized from her own translation work. There was a prospectus for a new charitable foundation, the Kwan Han Foundation, dedicated to supporting multicultural families and underprivileged children in Seoul. The chairman was listed as Jin Huan Kwan. She spread the documents out on her kitchen table. It was proof, tangible, irrefutable proof. He wasn't just making promises. He was doing it. He was burning his kingdom to the ground. For her. Her mother found her staring at the papers, tears streaming down her face. "What is it, baby?" "He's changing," Amara whispered, a wild, terrifying hope blooming in her chest. "He's actually changing." "People like that don't change," her mother said gently. "He is," Amara insisted, tapping the papers. "He's doing it, and it must be costing him everything." She thought of the man she had fallen in love with, the man trapped in a gilded cage. He had just handed her the key. The question was whether she was brave enough to use it. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But for the first time, the hope was stronger. She stood up, her decision made. "I have to go back." Her mother looked at her, at the new light in her daughter's eyes, and for the first time she didn't argue. She just hugged her tightly. "Then you go, and you be happy." The flight back to Seoul was the longest of her life. She didn't call him. She didn't email. She didn't know what she would find. She didn't know if he had survived the war he had started. She walked out into the arrivals hall at Incheon Airport, the same hall where she had so defiantly chosen the bus over him. Her heart was in her throat. And then she saw him. He was standing near the exit, away from the crowds. He was not flanked by suited bodyguards. He was alone. He was wearing a simple gray coat, and he looked tired. There were new lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but the haunted darkness was gone. He just looked like a man. Waiting. Their eyes met across the bustling terminal. The world seemed to fall away, just as it had in the first-class lounge all those months ago. He didn't smile. He just watched her, his expression a mixture of hope and terror. She started walking toward him, her steps hesitant at first, then faster, until she was almost running. She didn't stop until she was right in front of him. They stood there for a heartbeat, just breathing each other in. "You came back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You crazy, reckless man," she whispered, her hand coming up to touch the scar at his temple. "Did you do it? Is it done?" "It's done," he confirmed. "My father. We are estranged. I have many new enemies. My life is still complicated. But it is mine, and it is clean." Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of relief, of overwhelming love. "Was it worth it?" "I would have burned down the whole world for you, Amara," he said, his voice raw with a year of pent-up longing. And that was all she needed to hear. She surged forward, her arms wrapping around his neck, and crashed her mouth against his. The reunion kiss was not gentle or sweet. It was desperate. It was hungry. It was the closing of a painful chasm, a frantic, passionate confirmation that they had survived the separation, that they had survived the war. It was the taste of a new beginning, a promise of a future they would build together from the ashes of the past. 1 year later, the Amara Jones Language Institute opened its doors in a bright, sunny building in a quiet Seoul neighborhood. It wasn't a large school, but it was hers, funded by a combination of her own relentless savings and a surprising, anonymous donation to the city's small business fund that she had a strong suspicion about. Her first class was full of bright-eyed kids from a dozen different backgrounds, their laughter filling the hallways. Jinhwan's new life was quieter, but no less demanding. Kwan Holdings was now a respected, if less ostentatiously profitable player in the construction and green energy sectors. The transition had been costly, both financially and personally. His father had never spoken to him again. The ghosts of his past still lingered, and he and Min Jun, now his official chief of operations, still had to be careful. But for the first time, Jin Hwan felt free. He was a constant, quiet presence in Amara's life. He would show up at the school at the end of the day, not as a powerful benefactor, but just as a man waiting for the woman he loved. He would help her clean whiteboards and listen to her stories about her students, his face full of a soft admiration that still made her heart skip a beat. Their evenings were spent in his penthouse, which was no longer a sterile cage but a home, filled with her books, her music, and the scent of her cooking. The violence and fear had been replaced by a profound and peaceful intimacy. The scars were still there, on both of them. They were a reminder of the price they had paid. But they were scars, not open wounds. One cool autumn evening, they stood on the balcony, looking out at the glittering city. Amara leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. The city was the same, but their world had been completely remade. "I still can't believe you did it," she said softly, "that you gave all that up." He turned her to face him, his dark eyes serious. "I gave up nothing," he said, his voice full of conviction. "Power, money, fear, they are all empty. I was a king of an empire of ashes. You showed me what was real." He gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing her jawline. "You are my kingdom, Amara. You were always the only thing worth fighting for." She smiled, a real, brilliant smile that reached her eyes. In the reflection of his gaze, she no longer saw a woman struggling to survive, but a woman who was loved, cherished, and finally, truly home. This story teaches us that true strength isn't found in power or control over others, but in the courage to change for the better. It shows that love isn't about accepting darkness, but about inspiring light. Jin Hwan's immense power was a prison until he chose to dismantle it, not for wealth or status, but to become a man worthy of the love he had found. Amara's resilience lay in her refusal to compromise her principles, proving that holding on to one's values is its own form of power. Their journey reminds us that the most profound transformations are born from love, and that a shared future is a kingdom far greater than any built on fear. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content, and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. We work hard to create stories that are not only entertaining, but also offer insights into human nature and the difficult choices we face. If this story moved you, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel for more dramatic tales, and sharing it with someone who appreciates a story of redemption and love against all odds. Now, we want to hear from you. What did you think of the moment Amara decided to leave? Was it an act of self-preservation or a lack of faith in Jin Hwan's capacity to change? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and for our next story, we have a poll for you. Would you like to see A story about Min Jun, the loyal second in command, as he navigates the new, legitimate world and perhaps finds an unexpected love of his own? B A prequel story about Jin Huan's father, Chairman Quan, showing how he built his ruthless empire from nothing? Let us know your choice in the comments. We can't wait to read your feedback.